Hello there and welcome to this developer diary recap series for Imperator Rome. Around about each month, I cover the latest developer diaries and post a video. There's so far as of recording been 22 diaries, and this will be the fourth video in the series. If you haven't checked out the others, please do check the video cards, the description, and the playlist that links to the others. Let's begin. Diary number 18, the Italic Military Traditions. Covered in diary number 16, military traditions are a sort of military technology tree. They're divided up across empires by their culture, and they're each split into 3 linear paths of 8. After you get 7 traditions in a path, the 8th unlocks for free, and Johan has stated that it's not very likely you'll get all 24 traditions in one playthrough, so you have to pick and choose. So, looking at the Italic traditions, the paths are split into the tribal path, the support path, and the Roman path. Now remember, any Italic culture nation will have the same tradition tree, so while one of the paths is called the Roman path, it's not exclusive to Romans. Without getting too granular into each specific tradition, each tree has an ability that you can grab halfway through it. So for instance, the acquisition of wealth in the tribal path enables the raid city ability. Now while you're at war and taking over enemy territory, you then have the option to raid the city, which gives you instant money and manpower, but hurts the city for growth, output and commerce for 5 years. In the support path we get Castra, enabling you to build border forts. This lets you create a colony in an unknown city adjacent to one of your own. Going back all the way to diary number 11, we learned about the army ability called Military Colony, which is the standard way to colonize an empty city. The difference between the regular military colony and the border fort is that with the border fort, the city is colonized with a fort building instantly, so it has some defenses. And just to catch people up, there are patches of territory in the game not owned by anyone. These are what the empty cities are that I'm referring to. They have low civilization level and they need to be colonized, but you can only colonize adjacent cities to your borders. And remember, cities are just the name of regions in Imperator Rome. They really should change that because that is becoming quite confusing. Lastly, in the Roman path, there's an ability for military road building. We covered this before in diary number 16. It basically means that your armies can build roads as they march, and from what I understand, there doesn't seem to be another way to build roads without this tradition, or at least we haven't been told if there is yet. So the Greeks, for instance, won't ever have their own roads, which is kind of weird. Diary number 19, Loyalty. Before getting into loyalty directly, Johan discusses unrest again. Previously it was mentioned in diary number 16. Unrest is caused by low pop happiness, and that happiness is affected by the pop type, its culture, and religion. It's also generated through war exhaustion, corruption, stability, and governor policies. When unrest reaches 10, you can no longer recruit units, build buildings, or interact with the pops. To alleviate this unrest, you can enact laws, improve stability, and assign armies to governors. That last one is going to be important, so remember it. Okay, so on to loyalty. There's 3 types of loyalty: province loyalty, cohort loyalty, and character loyalty. Each province, which is a collection of cities that are necessary to completely control in order to trade, have a loyalty value to the country. If its loyalty reaches 0%, then the province is 100% autonomous and doesn't provide anything to you. They cancel their trade and all cities act as if they have 10 unrest. If enough provinces become disloyal in this way, they may start an independence war or a civil war depending on their culture. More on civil wars just a little bit later. Next level down is the cohort loyalty. Depending on the charisma of the commander during a battle, a cohort may become loyal to that commander. When this happens, the unit becomes cheaper to maintain, as the cost is partially being paid for by the commander themselves. The drawbacks of this are that loyal cohorts are non-transferable. They're stuck in the army, unless disbanded completely. Another drawback is that commanders will increasingly become disloyal the more loyal cohorts they have. Next level down is characters. Disloyal characters are described by Johan as a huge risk, as they'll refuse to abandon their armies or their provinces, and they may form a bloc together and create a civil war. A character is considered disloyal when they reach 33% loyalty. If a commander of an army becomes disloyal, and more than 1/3 of his army is loyal to him, then a civil war threat meter starts to build. This can also happen if 1/3 of your governors become disloyal. Basically, just avoid the 1/3 threshold for loyalty for everyone and everything. The threat of civil war builds and lasts for 1 year, and then the war breaks out. Presumably this is your time to imprison or execute anyone disloyal in exchange for tyranny, though we don't have enough information on that yet. Once a civil war breaks out, all disloyal characters and provinces defect, and a war to the death begins. If you lose the war, you lose the game, and you get the end game screen. There's no mention of claims or a new country being formed if you can kind of have a peace term reached. It's just straight up deathmatch where you have to completely stamp out the rebels and they've got to completely stamp out you. Territories will exchange as soon as armies stand on them, and as for what happens after you win, if political parties are affected or not, if all disloyal characters are killed or imprisoned, we don't know yet. Diary number 20, Governor Policies. When assigning a governor to a province, they'll enact a policy for that province dependent on their personality. Policies have some good and bad trade-offs, and only one can be active at a time. If you want, you can overrule the governor and change the policy yourself, but that will come at the cost of their loyalty. After all, you are just undermining them. If they become disloyal, they'll change the policy to what they want, and if you recall in the last diary, you can't then move them out of the province, so they could be a real pain in the ass if you get a real grumpy governor in place who won't budge. Some of the policies can cause unrest, so no doubt disloyal governors will probably try to create an autonomous province that gives you nothing back. That's all we got about governor policies, but I think it's actually a very cool concept in principle when you tie it to the loyalty system, so it should be interesting to see how it plays out. Along with this diary, Johan added the African military traditions. Again, I don't like getting too much into the weeds with stats, but they do have the tribal path, the naval path, and the army path. And the notable level 4 traditions are cavalry skirmish stance, repair at sea, and extra manpower from subjects. We haven't yet had concrete details on how they manifest themselves, so we'll just leave it at that. Diary number 21, Combat. Combat in Imperator Rome occurs when two armies that are at war step into the same city. Whoever was in there first is considered to be the defender, unless there's a fort already there, in which case the defender is the owner of the fort. Combat is done through dice rolls, with a minimum roll of 0 and a maximum roll of 6. Then modifiers based on terrain will add or take away from that number. Mountains, for instance, give a +2 to the defender, hills and forests give a +1. Things like crossing a river for the attacker or doing a naval landing is a -1. The commander with the most martial skill will also get a dice roll modifier. Depending on what you roll will determine what damage you do to the enemy army. Damage calculations are applied once daily in Imperator Rome, and the dice is rolled every few days, but we haven't been given a number on that one yet. If you roll a 0 or below in combat, you'll always still do a minimum of 2% damage to the enemy. If you roll a maximum of 6 and have all the modifiers that could bring you up to a total possible of 15, which is the best you could get, you'll do 30% damage. That's the overall army level of combat, but there is also the cohort level. A virtual battlefield is simulated with 2 rows of 30 positions for each side, as well as a reserve where the cohorts currently not fighting will be. Armies will arrange themselves to have infantry in the middle, cavalry on the flanks, and ranged support at the back when they can. Unit-to-unit matchups will apply small damage and casualty modifiers. Things like unit discipline, experience, and loyalty grants a positive modifier, while other things like unit type and overall combat tactics could impact it negatively if done wrong. Combat tactics are essentially stances you choose for your army, both offensive and defensive, that will then be applied if you're the attacker or the defender. There's 5 in total, and once you're in battle, you cannot change your tactics. Tactics are a series of rock, paper, scissors type choices, each with a preferred matchup and a hard counter. If, for instance, you're the attacker and you chose the all-out assault tactic, and the defender chose the hard defense tactic, you'd have a negative 20% damage against them, and they'd do a plus 10% damage against you. If you chose probing attack instead, then you would have got a plus 10% and they would have got a minus 10%. So tactics can have a relatively big impact on casualties. So all of that combined, there's lots of little variables going on with combat. You'll want to have loyal, disciplined and experienced units, a commander with high martial ability, favorable terrain, and choose the right tactics for everything to go your way, and then of course you're still slightly at the mercy of the dice roll within that. Diary number 22, Italy 450 AUC. Diaries from this point on I believe will be written by Trin, Tregula and not Johan. Personally, I really liked having Johan do it, and I think something will be lost by not having the game director and lead designer write the diaries themselves, but now a bit more time can be done for formatting and stuff like that. This diary focused on the history of the time period and the starting countries. There's strange wording here, but as clarified, you can play as any country you want on the map, but some of them are called starting countries, and 36 of them have been specifically outlined for this diary. It's mostly just historical flavor, so if you're into history a lot, I recommend you go read them yourself, and I'll read out some of the most prominent ones in each category. First off, we have Rome. It's an independent Italic city-state that has grown in the last 40 years to be the dominant power in central Italy. Having just defeated the Samnites and the Etruscans and acquired a number of new feudatory subject states, Rome is starting to draw the attention of more faraway powers such as Carthage, Rhodes, and Epirus. While the success of the Samnite Wars have cemented Roman military superiority, they also highlight how even small conflicts can blow up into great, multi-sided wars in this region. Next up we have Syracuse, a Sicilian Greek kingdom that at times have controlled most of the island. Only a medium power in the grand scheme of things, but an important strategic piece of the Mediterranean puzzle. Syracuse have previously been the overlord of much of southern Italy, and many expect that it has ambitions to that effect again. Next up we have Carthage. Now, we were looking at the overall region of Sicily during this kind of moment in the diary, and Carthage is not a Sicily-based power, so we'll get more on that later, but nonetheless, we're told they are one of the most influential playable countries in this region. The population of Carthaginian Sicily is a mix of Carthaginians, native Sicilians, and Greeks. Next along in southern Italy would be Tarentum, small but influential Greek city-state leader of the new defunct Italiate League. Tarentum has often been an ally of the Samnites and sometimes an enemy of Rome. Fearing growing Roman power, the Samnites have come to support Agathocles of Syracuse, but Tarentum is equally concerned with Roman and Syracusean aggression and has instead sought other friends. It has found new allies in Sparta, Epirus, and even the former enemy, Messapia. Then of course we have the Boii in northern Italy, a tribal kingdom centered around the location of the modern city of Bologna. Like many other tribes, they are said to have migrated into Italy across the Alps, but their exact origin is unknown. And that is it for all the kind of countries that I'm going to read about. There was 36 listed in that diary, so please do go check them out if you're interested in knowing more. That is it for diaries 18 to 22. Remember to check the description for the previous diaries and for the upcoming ones later as I go back and update them after they come out. Let me know your thoughts on loyalty, civil wars, and combat. I, for one, really like the sound of it, though I was hoping for something that looked a little bit more like a battle simulation like Stellaris, done in a sort of a football manager style window, maybe it'd be 2D or something where you see your tactics play out in some regard. Again, I'll put out the question, are you getting more excited or less interested as the diaries go on? I'm very, very, very eager to hear your opinions on that. And please also remember, if you like this video and want to see me continue recapping the developer diaries and cover the game with guides and videos when it comes out, please hit like, subscribe, and share it with anyone who you think will be interested. Thank you very much as always, and I'll see you in the next one.